Okay, good evening, everybody. It is February the 11th, 2021, and this is MELS 601, the clinical coach session. And I'm welcoming everybody to the session tonight. It is, let's see, 2 days, 11, 12, 13, 2 days before my youngest daughter's 18th birthday. So if you see a tear run down here, that's the reason why. And I'll be doggone. I was hoping she's in her senior year. She's already got accepted to college. Already got some great. She got a cheerleading, and I'm gonna do some bragging. And I'm sorry. Uh, she got a cheerleading scholarship to Montreat College, which is a real small college, but it's really great. And I was hoping we would make it to college before she got interested in another guy. And lo and behold, if I didn't find out this week that she's talking. And I've learned to say with her, I've learned to say, are you talking, or are you just talking? Well, praise God, we're just talking right now. And I'm hoping that she'll move away before it goes to talking. So for whatever it's worth. But it's also, I think I just saw that it is Stormy's mom's 50th birthday. So congratulations and happy birthday to her. And as for to somebody who's 55, I'll tell you what, I've had more fun in my 40s and 50s than I did in my teens and my 20s and 30s. The only thing I'm thinking is that I actually have more fun, or I'm just getting so old that I forgot all the really good fun that I had when I was younger. But I'm enjoying my 40s and 50s. So, Stormy, congratulations to your mom, and I hope things go well. I hope things go well with that, and she enjoys that time. All
Thank
right.
you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're very welcome. Now, it is also Valentine's Day, so if you have a significant other in your life, don't forget them. I did really good this year. All of my Valentine presents for my beautiful, lovely wife, and I'm hoping she's listening right now. My beautiful, adoring, lovely wife has come in the mail, so all I got to do is wrap them. All right, enough rambling, unless somebody else wants to share something. Since I rambled, I will give you all the opportunity to ramble, but I don't want to take away your time because we're not here about me and my daughter and my beautiful, lovely, adoring wife. We're not here about that. We're here about getting you through the MELS program and rocking and rolling all the way to graduation so you guys can go out and be administrators and get great jobs and talk about how wonderful Gardner Webb University is. So tonight, it's been a while since we met in real time, face to face. I hope the recording that I put out helped you. I hope the task stream, there was some difference in what Dr. Lamb said and what Dr. Stedman said in their task stream orientation than what we're doing. And I hope that didn't confuse you. There is a little bit of difference in the way we do things. But what we do works for us, for Dr. Church and I, and getting you guys cranked up as we're talking about. Got to keep in mind, you're talking about add-on people and traditional 5-semester people together in the same meeting. Then there's going to be some differences, and things are handled a little bit different from if you're an add-on than if you're a master's. But like I said, what Dr. Church and I works for us works for our students, and so we are going to adjust things a little bit depending upon that. I do plan on talking about task 3 and task 4 tonight. I want to talk, just kind of go through the Blackboard review process one more time, just to make sure there's not any questions on that. But if there are any burning questions in your mind that you want addressed right now so you can get them off your plate in regards to anything that we've talked about this far, anything that Dr. Church has shared with you, I'm going to go ahead and open the floor up for any of those questions. Okay, all right. Well, if something pops up, feel free to let me know. I'll try to monitor the chat as well. If they've got questions, just type them in there. We will. Okay, great question, and I will address that. Thank you about dispositions. But we will revisit task stream. I don't know that I'll do that tonight because, as you remember, it's going to be a while before you have to mess with task stream. Our main goal right now is to get the Absol in good shape. That's number one priority. Then we'll get into task stream, because whatever you're doing now with the Absol is gonna be what you need to complete task stream. And so if we get the Absol in great shape and we get that off your to-do list, then what you did in the Absol, we can pull out and put into task stream. So I'm probably not going to address it unless, like I said, unless there's something I need to do to alleviate any confusion that might have been caused from the last week, or something that'll help you. So, but yeah, we will go back to task stream again. You've got that video that I did last week, just to kind of go through it real briefly, just to kind of help, give you something to refer to if you feel like you need to revisit that. But we will, when we get to probably the next session, we're talking about 3 and 4 tonight. We'll talk about 5 next session, and then I'll probably do task stream then. But there was a question on the dispositions. Do we need to add any comments? I am going to, if you do, let me just put it this way. If you do, if you don't, I'm good with that. As long as you've done a really good job on the Absol and you've given really good reflections, I'm okay with you not adding comments. But if you do add comments, Dr. Lamb, he was right on the mark there. Those comments can be pulled from the Absol as well. Because in task 5, which is what we'll talk about, later on, in task 5, you're going to reflect on some leadership competencies. Now, the disposition is going to ask you to do a self-assessment on all the leadership competencies. With Absol task 5, you're really only asked to reflect on, I believe it's 9 leadership competencies. So you can copy and paste out of the reflection and put it into the disposition, and that is fine. But you're not going to, and Dr. Lamb told you all that in the session, but there's going to be some competencies that's going to ask you to self-assess on that you didn't address in the reflection. So do I leave that blank, or do I make up something to put it in there? And that is totally up to you as well. Just remember that this School of Ed dispositions, and I will talk about this again, but this School of Ed disposition is just a self-assessment on where you feel you're at right now in those dispositions of leadership. There's no grading here. There's no right. There's no wrong. It's just another example that we can show DPI and Gardner-Webb and the accreditation organization that we caused you to reflect on your leadership. It's kind of how we show growth, just like you in the school system, just like we do every day, and I'm in that school system too. We look at proficiency and we look at growth. And the School of Ed dispositions, the competency analysis, that's what we use to kind of show growth, because you're not going to meet everything right now. It's either met or not met, or you grade yourself on those dispositions. It's okay if you hit not met, because you haven't gone through the program. At the end of the program, then yeah, you will have opportunity to comment on every competency, and you can copy and paste that over from all the evidences if you choose to, but it's not essential. And I know I took you all the way around the world to cross the street on that, but I just wanted to give you a good explanation. But do we need to add any comments? The simple answer is no, you don't. If you choose to, you can copy and paste from the reflections that you're going to do in task 5. And we haven't even got there yet, but it's still a great question, and it's one that needed to be answered at some point in time. All right, let me go ahead and share. Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you, sir. Let me go ahead and share my screen, and I want to pull up my go-to, and that is the scale handbook. So right now you should be looking at the scale handbook. So task 1 and task 2, you should be pretty well underway with those. And you should be, if you're not looking at the scale handbook, if I didn't do the screen share right, let me know. But and if you're not, that's okay. If I haven't got to my worry mark yet. If you haven't completed task 1 and task 2, I have gotten a few of them in, a lot of them in. They are great. Dr. Church is knocking it out of the park with y'all, because the drafts that I'm getting are really good. There's a few that I'm saying, hey, I'm not touching this. It's perfect the way it is. you just send it on to the assignment Dropbox and I'll grade it. So you guys are doing great work. I'm feeling really, really, really good about this cohort. But if you're not finished with task 2 yet, it's okay. It's all right. Yeah, you should be pretty close to wrapping up task 1 and getting ready to get into task 2 if you haven't already. Within the next week or so, you really need to finish up task 2 and start getting into task 3. Dr. Church may have told you something different, gave you a different kind of parameter, and that's fine. That's just his perspective versus my perspective, because he knows you got about the content work that you've got to do in his class as well. If you feel like you're behind in what I'm trying to say, just reach out to me and we'll have a conversation about where you're at, what your plan is for the next 2 weeks, and then we'll kind of judge if you're in good shape or not. So task 1, need to find out how to create a PLC. You do research on creating a PLC. You talk to your principal or your leadership about getting permission. You kind of set things up, and then you meet with your team to say, okay, this is our mission. We're going to set our norms. Let's talk. What do you think a PLC is? Let's kind of talk about how we want to run this professional learning community before we do anything else. That takes you through task 1. Task 2 is, all right, now that we've kind of got organized, we know what our mission is, we got everybody at the table that we need to have at the table. Let's look at our environment. Let's look at our data. Where can we do some good? We can think we could do some good here, but let's know where we can do some good. How do we know? By looking at our environment, by looking at our data, by doing a needs assessment, by reaching out and looking at our school and saying, okay, where do we need to focus our efforts? Now, Dr. Church and I talked to you about that. You might have a really good idea of where you want to go, and that's great. All that tells us is that you're really in tune with your school and with your department or wherever you're working at, and you know you have a good direction of where you want to go because you're a leader, and that's what you do. You already have a good idea of what needs to be addressed. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's not share that necessarily in task 1. Let's wait and share that after we have the data that backs up what we say. And that in a couple of comments, I've told you, hey, this is great information, but in telling your narrative and your story, it doesn't necessarily belong in task 1. It's better serves you if you wait till maybe task 2 or at the end of task 2, because then you have the data to back up what you're saying. You can have a general idea. Don't get me wrong. You have a general idea, but to get into some specifics, it's okay if you already had that conversation with your PLC team, but let's wait and share with the reader what you decided or what your team has decided after we show the reader the data that supports what you're doing. And this kind of helps the reader out in looking at it sequentially, in that, okay, they've got a focus, they got a direction, but they told me why beforehand, because they got the data, and the data backs that up. Okay, so that's task 2. Now that we have identified the need, how are we going to meet that need? Well, you probably got some good ideas of how you're going to meet that need. But just like you need data to back up that need, you need data or best practices. And I wish they changed that. I like research-based practices a whole lot better, because best practices, and it does say we'll research best practices. I just think I like research best practices a whole lot better. Doesn't mean you need to change it in your narrative. That's just my preference. But what have others done to address this need? Maybe a specific need, it may be a need that's similar, but what have the experts done to address this need and needs? And before we do that, before we can tell that, we need to dig into the literature and refine and find that out. So you write a narrative of your team looking through the literature and determining the best practices that are out there. This is where you show collaboration. This is where you show your delegation, your facilitation of this group as guiding them through the best practice. Now, and you want to be you want to be strategic about what you look at. It's okay to browse through a few things and pick out, okay, this is what we want to look at. And people say, well, how many sources? How many best practices do we need to look at? There is not a right answer here. That is for you and your team to determine, and you need to share how you determine that in your narrative, because that's where you're showing leadership, is guiding that team through looking through the literature and determining what practice is out there that's considered research-based, evidence-based, that others have done or experts have done that's had a positive impact in another setting. Does that evidence-based practice have implications for our setting and our need? That's where the leadership piece comes into you working with your team on this, because you guide them to that, and you as a group in a collaborative process determine that. Determine what practices do we want to look at, and not all of them, just the ones we think that has an implication for what the need is that we be identified, or needs, and task two. Now, you need to show that in I'll get it in a minute, annotated bibliography, okay? You need to show that. So within that narrative, and as you talk about the literature and you talk about what you reviewed and you talk about what your team, the conversations you had to determine the practices you want to look at, then you need to give annotated bibliography. Now there is in my, I know, I think Dr. Church has it in his course shell, but in my Blackboard shell, there is within the helpful hints for tasks for the ABSL, it talks about our annotated bibliography. I think there's also a separate document in there that gives you some direction on writing an annotated bibliography. I need a cup of coffee so I can say that word if I had to say it again. All right, so let's move on down to the prompt. Prompt one is you create that annotated bibliography featured within the narrative. Just don't put the bibliography in there. Make it a part of your narrative to show that you guys looked at those resources of evidence-based practices in relationship to the need that's identified. And there is this section, or there is this little phrase in here at the end of this prompt that says, features online tools to support the teacher and student. Well, that's a little bit of a challenge in regular semesters. A lot of people have these online tools, but that does not mean you need to go out and purchase a software program or a platform. Doesn't mean you need to do that. But those evidence-based practices that you're looking at, what opportunities do they have for technology? Even to the point, if you're working with Canvas, can they be included in Canvas? But where we're at right now with remote instruction, I think your cohort is better prepared to meet that little section than anybody prior, because that's what you're working on right now. Everything that you're looking at right now, you got to look at in terms of how could this be utilized in remote instruction? So I usually, like I said, that can create a little bit of a roadblock or maybe even a speed bump for some candidates. I don't think it will be for you, but if you kind of get hung up on that, let me know. But nowadays, everything pretty much has an online application. So, and this is the second prompt. And prompt two, you need to use graphic organizers, visuals, charts, graphs, tables, timelines. And you're saying, well, in what respect? In the narrative, demonstrate how these evidence-based practices could, as I said, have implication for the need of your student. Suggest how that strategy, not all of them, you don't have to do this for all of them, but the one you guys kind of determine in your group, that chosen strategy, how kind of project what impact that will have on the need. And a lot of these places, they'll give you that kind of data, like have this kind of increase. Especially if it's a research study, it'll show you the results of the research and the impact that had on their respondents or their participants. And that kind of lets you project where it could have an effect on your participants. So you do need to and it doesn't have to be a table or a chart. Like I said, it can be a timeline. It could just be a graphic organizer. It could be a flow chart. or a visual of how your team envisions the utilization of this evidence-based practice. I'm going to stop there. What questions do you have on what I talked about so far? Is your question how I could possibly butcher the word annotated so many times?
That's funny. I have a question. I guess on prompt 2, I am wondering, is it a graphic organizer for the group to use or for the students to use? Because when I think about best practices, I'm thinking about like what I'm gonna have my students do, like making their learning visible. So could you explain that a little bit better for me?
Yeah, and Libby, that's an excellent question. It caused me to think of something else as well, and I appreciate that. No, it's not. It's not like if you talk about graphic organizers, it's not a graphic organizers that you will use in the instruction or the implementation. It's a graphic organizer that projects the impact, like where you see how you see it being used with your participants.
I figure that was what you were saying, but I just get caught up in the teacher brain and what I'm supposed to be doing for my students and not what I'm
Yeah.
supposed to be doing in the meeting.
Well, and I tell you what, that's a great point because that's the main struggle for all of you right now is taking the lens of the teacher off and putting the lens of an administrator on. And I tell you, it's like that at every level. When I was a teacher, I thought the AP had it made. I thought, man, that guy doesn't do anything but stand around the buses and has to call a kid in to talk to him every now and then. That cat's got it made. Well, when I became an assistant principal, I found a whole lot different. And when I was an AP, I thought, well, the principal's got it made because I'm doing all the grunt work. I'm out here, looking in the bathrooms, searching for drugs and looking at buses and dealing with angry parents. The principal just gets to go to the meeting, get to go to the central office. They have it made. Man, when I got to become a principal, found out different. Same thing with being in the central office, found out different. So it's always a transition in how you look at things. So that is a great point. If you will notice at the very end of this prompt, and Libby, your question caused me to remember that I did not mention this. It says, suggest the use of a technology not already being used. There's a lot of flexibility with that. Don't get hung up on that. You do not have to search something out there that's never been used before with that group. All that is trying to infer is that you don't do what you've always done to address a need that you identified. It could be that you use something in a different way. And just like Canvas, Canvas is a technology the kids have used, if you're with the school that uses Canvas, and I like to use it for an example quite a bit, they're using that technology day in and day out, but what you do with it and the information you put in it is a little bit different. But don't get hung up so much on the use of technology that's not already being used. If your team identifies something and it's something that's already being used in the district or the school, and you feel like that's a speed bump for you, contact me and we'll talk about it. All right, any other questions on task 3?
I have another question.
Sure.
It's about prompt 2 again. So is that where would you talk about charts? Thank you. And graphic organizers and visuals, that could be, for example, I do progress monitoring. So I have trends of data from years past. So could I use data from last year and then data from what I did this year to show an improvement in instruction and student learning? Is that some, okay.
I like that because and be sure that you kind of convey that to the reader. You're not just looking at, oh, okay, this is what happened last year. Gosh, we got to change everything we did based on what happened last year. Trend data is always so much more powerful because there could always be a fluke in any data. It could be an anomaly that doesn't necessarily tell the true story. So yes, absolutely, you can use trend data. And using the visuals for prompt 2, you could show those visuals, and then you could say, this is how the evidence-based practice, this is how we're hoping that we'll have an impact on this data. So that's great. Great point. I'm going to check the chat box here for just a second. It looks like something popped up. If I can, what did I do with it? I lost it. There it is. Something's going goofy. I can't bring up my chat box. Whoever typed something in the chat box, I don't know what's going on. I'm having a hard time bringing up my chat box. Can you unmute yourself and ask that question? Or if it was a question, if it was just a comment, that's fine.
It was just a comment on how using last year's data would be somewhat of a life-saving decision because of that.
Great. Yeah, and I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead and tell anything that you want to tell.
Well, it's because we have implemented a CFA, but only me and another teacher has graded those. And since social studies don't really we haven't been doing common data assessments, it's been a challenge. So I will try to dig in some data from last year to use it as a
perfect
baseline.
example. Yeah, perfect example. Great. Thanks for sharing. And I'll try to do a better job of figuring out what's going on with my chat. But great questions, great comments. It's not doing anything but benefiting others when you share and ask questions. So I really appreciate that.
So I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I was planning on, I've pulled data from the last 3 years to kind of do a comparison, and I was going to put that in task 2.
Excellent.
Should I save that and put that in task 3 instead?
No, that's a great question, Joshua. No, in that context, no, you shouldn't. You should go ahead, because that's what your team looked at as you were having those conversations and focusing in on where you needed to look. So that's perfect. Now, what you can do, take that same visual, use it in task 3, but then talk about how, based on the evidence-based practice that your team chose, how you expect it to impact that data. So you can actually reuse that again, but you need to use it in a different way and in a different context. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And like I said, anything I'm telling you, once I read it and review it, I'll give you feedback on it. If it's not working for you, or I didn't do a good job of explaining, which is more likely the case, then we'll revisit that and we'll fix it to where it can be used. And I'll help you with that. I'll help you with, okay, I see what you're trying to say. Let's look at it in this way. A great question. But yeah, you can use it, but you just need to put it within in a different context. All right, task 3, good for everybody, or we still got some questions? I'm scrolling. Stop me. I'm scrolling. Okay, we're in task 4, but if we need to go back to task 3, no problem. Just let me know. Task 4 is where you put it all, wrap it up all in a nice little present and give it to your leadership team or your administrative team. This is where, based on the needs assessment, based on the evidence-based practices and the projection of that practice introduced into the participants in the environment in which you're working in, this is how we're going to do it. This is an action plan. This is the plan of how we want to take that evidence-based practice or practices and have a positive impact, or what we think is going to be a positive impact may not be on that need or needs. And that's okay. That's all about action research. That's what I was, as a principal, it's what I had conversations with my grade levels and department heads several times, is, it's okay if we try something. If we try something based on sound research and based on data and it doesn't work, that's okay. That's what we needed to find out. It didn't work. We need to try it in a different way or try something else. That's why we need to be very careful about the need that we identify, making sure it is a true need and is backed up by data, not what we think will help, or not what we think needs to be addressed, but what the data says it needs to be addressed. And that's when we pick out the solution to that problem is we make daggone sure that that solution is research-based, evidence-based, and has a proven record of helping other students in a similar situation, at a similar demographic, in a similar area to our school. That's what action research does. Is we find out, okay, if we know, just like, you know, the old story about Thomas Edison finding 99 ways not to invent a, you know, a light bulb. That's okay. We found that we can mark that off the list. Now we're going to look for something else. We just need to be very careful about that process. So we create an action plan. Now, in terms for you in writing a narrative on task 4, let's do this. Okay. Before you created a PLC, you gave evidence that you researched what a PLC was, and it influenced you on creating a PLC. Before you, the very first thing here, before you share your action plan, you need to do research on what an action plan is and show the reader that that research is influenced you on the creation of you, or influenced you and your team on the creation of your action plan. Doesn't mean you have to have 3 to 5 sources. Don't get me wrong here. It can be one source. There's not a lot of different ways you can do a research-based action plan, but you need to show the reader that you are well read and how to create an action plan. All right. So what are some things that you need to talk about? And just what I said, number 1, the importance of an action plan, and that means the research behind an action plan. And here we go. You know, kind of this. We're looking at possible suggestions for sections of your narrative, subheadings of your narrative. How's it going to align with your student learning outcomes? What's your short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals and objectives on this? What do you hope to accomplish, you know, in the short term, in the mid-term, and the long term? Now, you know, we're in the spring here, so it may very well be that this goes beyond into next year, and that's okay. The goal here, and the main thing is, we're not talking about, you don't have to implement this action plan, you know, before you finish with 601. You just have to create one and show it to the team, to your administration. Doesn't mean it has to be implemented, just has to be created and projected. What's some of the activities? What's some of the indicators of success? What's the roles and responsibilities? What's the formative and summative assessment criteria? Okay, so, and that's all about an action plan. What's an action plan? Action plan is you identified a need and you've created strategies to address that need. Who's going to be responsible for those strategies? What's the timeline of implementation? What do you hope to have accomplished? And how are you going to evaluate that plan to determine, you know, whether it was effective or not? Is a plan we need to continue with? Same process you go through the school improvement plan. If you do NC STAR, then this, you're well aware, you know, you assess, you monitor, and you make, and you determine if you've accomplished that criteria or that standard, or you need to, and you can move on to a new standard, or you need to re-implement it. So that's just all part of that process. So that's prompt 1, is show that you know how to create an action plan and talk about the narrative of that action plan. Now, in that prompt 1, within that, you can show some of these things just by showing your action plan. You need to show a visual of the action plan. So a table within your narrative that has all these things highlighted. But there does need to be, don't just put the action plan here, there does need to be some narrative along with this where you talk about each of these items within the prompt, okay? You know, some of these things I think need to be pretty detailed narrative, like research based on the action plan. How are you plan on aligning that plan with your student learning outcomes? How's that plan? You know, that's where you kind of talk about the evidence-based practice and what you kind of revisit what you determined and the impact that the evidence-based practice is going to have on student outcomes. These objectives, that can be pretty detailed. When you get into the specific activities that's aligned with the goals and objectives, You could talk about that a little bit. That doesn't have to, you can actually combine these two right here. That doesn't have to be a lot. You can actually show this when you show the action plan. It will contain within the action plan. Indicators of success and measurements that can be shown within the action plan. You can talk about it a little bit, but it can also be shown in the action plan. Clarification of roles and responsibilities. You can show that within the action plan, and also the formative and summative assessment. Like I said, when I review this, when Dr. Church review this, if we think you need to add more detail, we'll let you know. So, but the action plan does need to be a part of this part of your narrative. All right, so once you get that, you and your team get that action plan created and ready for presentation, you present it to your administration. That's all you need to do to satisfy the rubric. It doesn't have to be incorporated or implemented or adopted by the administrative team. It's just needs to be shared with the leadership team, with the principal. You can determine that at your school. But in your narrative and in that presentation that you give to the administration, you need to include how that action plan is going to build efficacy of your students. How's it going to empower your students and your teacher? What are the strategies for sustained growth? How are you going to sustain that? And that'll be information that you can pull from the evidence-based practices. There should be some conversation within that research that tells you that. How are you going to address any issues that may be concerning diversity? What resources do you need? And how is this going to be implemented as far as how are you going to share this and get everybody to buy into it, basically? So it doesn't need to be a part of your action plan in terms of a column and a row and this information. It just needs to be a part of your narrative. As you presented this to your principal, then you address these items. And you talk about how this action plan is going to have an impact on all of this, hopefully a positive impact. And that is task 4. What questions do you have?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So it says indicators of success with measurement techniques. Now, is that something that we create, or is it something that we could say, you know, these are cutoff scores for words correct per minute, or, you know, that's set by, you know, a research-based practice like DIBELS? I refer to primary stuff because that's what
Sure.
I do. So could that be? Am I
Yes, you
thinking
are.
right? Or
Yes, you
okay.
are. Yeah, that is a great question. That's what you and your team need to have a conversation about. What are we going to, as we form this action plan, how are we going to determine if we're successful? And what does success look like for us? And you know what your students need. It could very well that you go back to the standards and you go back to what what your district says success is, or it's what success for that particular group of participants and for that particular school. And tell that story in your narrative. That is a great opportunity to show leadership. It's what's best for your school. Is it what the DPI says is what's best, or the district wants, or is it, if the district says, well, we consider you to be proficient if you're at 5%. Well, we know we're sitting at 1%. We know we're never going to get 5%. We're going to feel successful if we get 2% or 1.7% of whatever that is. So that's great. That's a great conversation for you and your team to have. Great question, Libby.
I have a 2-part question.
Okay, sure.
And I think that you may have answered one of the parts, because I'm the process manager for NC Star. So as soon as you mentioned the action plan, I immediately thought of the school improvement plan because I'm the one that inputs all of that.
Yeah.
So can you when you're typing it all out, can you kind of set it up the same way where you have the um actions and the indicators, and then you have like the actions where you put the person responsible, and then when it will be set by, and you have the each action for every indicator? Is that how we would set it up, the same
Yeah.
way that the plan would be set up?
Yeah, great point, Melissa. Yeah, that will work. I mean, if it's good enough for NC Star, it's definitely good enough for us. It doesn't have to be that way. It kind of goes back to it's really how what you and your team decide that you want to do. As long as however you set this up is that it's evidence based, you're in great shape. But that's a great point, Melissa. Yeah, NC Star can be a big benefit to you here. Absolutely.
Okay, and then the second part of my question is, can we pull some of the actions and the indicators from our school improvement plan? Because I know we have to do the FAMS, and then we have to create the action plan for our school. And the indicators that we pull, we look at the data, but we also look at the FAMS to pull the needs from our schools. So can we say, based on this action, we're already doing this and incorporate it with the needs that we've addressed? Or should we not even go into that?
No, no, yeah, that's good. That's good. Then the key there is that it's applicable to the needs that your team addressed. There's no sense in going out and looking for, the answers that may already be in place. We just need to show that it is applicable and that it's having a positive impact. And you know, we're talking about the possibility of this actually being implemented. So if it actually being implemented by your school, as a teacher, you don't want to be thinking that you're doing one thing and this is the tools that I can work with. And then somebody says, well, no, here's a whole new set of tools and we're going to be working with this. If you can use the same tool to address two different needs or be consistent and have the same language, you know how powerful that is. So yeah, that absolutely, you can go ahead and do that. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Great questions. All right, anything else? Okay, I'm going to stop share on the scale handbook, but like I said, don't worry about asking questions. Oh, I found my chat box now. Okay, I got it. Okay, Stormy, if you're watching this via recording, don't worry about it. I appreciate you letting us know. Sorry your internet kicked out. It's not a problem. You can just catch up on the recording. If you've got any questions about anything I said, let me know via email, please, or any way else you need to get in contact with me. All right, so moving right along, do I need to revisit the process by which you submit stuff to me? I'm gonna go to my screen. I don't want to waste anybody's time on this, but we basically is you don't even fool with the Dropbox until I tell you to. We're going to do everything. We're going to do all our revisions and get it in good shape in the review. Once we get it in good shape for review, and I will tell you, like, if you needed to do some revisions, I will say, just do your revisions and then upload it into this discussion thread. You don't have to create a new discussion thread. You just upload it into the one where we've been talking. That's a whole lot simpler for me to keep up with the process of where you're at or where you're at in the process. And we do our revising here, and then after the revision, and then I'll say ready for Dropbox. I try to say ready for assignment or evaluation Dropbox, and just so you'll get used to the terminology. But I've got a bad habit of just saying, upload to Dropbox. If I say upload to Dropbox, then I'm talking about this right here. Don't forget, you got templates and resources here. Any video that I'm recording is going to land here eventually. To save you some time, I do email it to you straight, so you'll have it. But if you ever lose the email or you can't find it after you've looked at it, want to go back and refer to it, you can always find the recording in the video library. I think, yeah, I did want to click on templates and resources. Yeah, here we go. That's the document that I was talking about in doing your annotated bibliography. that's going to be real good to you or for you as you start writing that and putting that into task 3. So that's a good document to help you. It's a good resource for you there. But are we good on submitting work to my clinical internship shell in Blackboard? I mean, I feel like we are, because everybody's doing a great job. Sometimes in the past, and I hesitate to say this because when I say it, it's like I plant a seed in somebody's mind. They will upload to the Dropbox here first, and if you do, I have to give you a grade. The grade will be 0. It's okay though. And then I'll put some kind of comment in there. Hey, please, upload your draft to Absol Task for review first. We'll revise it, get it ready for the Dropbox. Then you can drop it back in when it's ready, and then the 0 will turn to 100. But if you put something in there, I have to give you a grade. And if I give you a grade for 100, then you might think I'm good to go and I'll never have to look at this again. And in reality, no, we do have to look at it again because it didn't go through the review process. So it happens every semester. If it happens to you, it's okay. It happens every semester, and it's okay. We'll get it worked out. All right. We're at 7:49. I'm good to sit here and answer any question or review any comment that you have. So you just let me know what you need.
I have a question about our clinical hours. So I didn't actually go to a board meeting, but I watched it from the news channel that live streamed it. And so I wasn't sure. I screenshot, that I was watching it, but I realized that you could do that with anything nowadays. So I wasn't really sure how I could get credit for, watching it virtually if they don't actually stream it themselves. The district doesn't, the Facebook Live or whatever, that's how they do it. So what should I do to prove that I did that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's okay. Our default at Gardner Webb is to trust you to be a professional, and it's okay if you screenshot that. And yeah, you can, especially nowadays. If you can watch it live stream and you don't have to be there, it's okay. It's okay. We're not going to ask you to jeopardize your health by going into a big crowd or whatever. You can just, in your proof, I think that column that says proof, you can put Facebook Live. And if there's any questions, you can refer back to that and, show if you have to. Nobody's going to question that nowadays anyway. That's not saying that,
Okay,
Go ahead.
Right. I'm actually on intermittent FMLA right now because I have a compromised immune system. I have several autoimmune diseases, so I can't. I can only do even telehealth visits unless I have like a extreme medical emergency to see my doctor. I'm not trying to have a pity party or anything, but I'm just in a situation where I can't actually be somewhere right now until I get my Fauci ouchie. So I'm really, nervous about showing proof.
Hey, and that is not a problem, Libby. And I appreciate you sharing that. And God bless you. Man, I tell you, that's tough to deal with. You stay safe. That's the main thing. The main thing is your health. Let's keep that #1 priority. And yeah, you don't need to attend a board meeting. You do whatever you can virtually. That's understood. If you won't ever get a question from me on that. And you won't ever get a question for anybody in Gardner Webb on that. And if you do, you let me handle it for you. Okay. So you just do what you need to do, and it's okay. And as you log those clinical hours, if there's a lot of virtual stuff, like I said, nowadays, I understand. You don't have to, you can be nervous without nowadays, anybody can find a reason to be really nervous, and you certainly got a good one. So yeah, not a problem. Not a problem. As always, with anything, if ever I have a question when I, review your internship log, we'll have a conversation about it and we'll be good. And I'm glad you brought that up. I did want to address the internship log. Make sure that you're still getting those opportunities to get hours and do those items. You know, we're in the long months of February right now, so this is a long time of year in a regular, you know, term for a teacher. So you're spending a lot of time engaged, whether you're at school or remotely. So there, continue to look for opportunities for those leadership hours. If you ever feel that you are not getting enough opportunities or your hours aren't coming as fast as you hope for them to come, let me know. We'll look together at ways for you to get those hours. If we need to, your clinical coach one will visit with you. They're real good to help that, and they're kind of the liaison between you and your administrator if there's any kind of, you know, situation needs to be discussed, especially in terms of getting leadership hours, and we'll work with you and work with your principal on that. Good comments and good questions tonight. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that all of you are putting into this to this program. The more you put, just like anything else, the more you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. What else can I help you with this evening?
For our leadership log, I have to administer the pre-ACT exam next week? Can we use that as part of that log?
If you're just, you know, and I hate to say it like that. Anytime somebody says, well, if it's just or you're just I don't like to sound that, but if it's a routine test administration, then you would not be able to count that for internship log hours. If you're, you know, a teacher given the EOG or given an EOC or the PreSat, if you're part of the organization, like if you help the testing coordinator in organizing that, getting that ready, doing the logistics, and if you're doing that yourself as part of that administration of the test for those students, then yes, you can. Does that make sense, Joshua?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. And a lot of times, you know, it depends on how you write it up too. That's why in your internship log, I'm glad you brought this up because it kind of helps me say this as well. In your internship log, it's always good just to, you know, to kind of explain a little bit. You don't have to write a paragraph. You don't even have to necessarily write 3 sentences. But when you put that example of that activity in that little row in that column, make sure you tell a little bit of what you did. If you say test administration of EOG, then I'm going to come back and ask you to tell me a little bit more about it. Did you pass out the test and read off the testing booklet and give everybody their pencil on their sheet of paper? That's not necessarily what we're looking for in terms of leadership, administrative leadership. But if you help your testing coordinator in doing the testing plan and getting the rooms organized, getting the proctors organized, checking in the materials, checking out the materials, then yeah, we can count that. So you need to tell just enough to kind of give a clear picture of what you are doing. Okay, I think I'm going to try and open my chat up and let me get off of this. Okay. There's a question. What is something that you would like to see as an artifact for an in-person or virtual interviews? Oh, great. If you're doing interviews, a set of the questions, a set of the interview questions would be good. Even if it's a screenshot of the calendar where you set up the appointment for the interview, that's good. If it's a virtual interview, you got to be careful with that. I don't necessarily would like for you to record the interview because there might be some confidential information within that interview that doesn't need to be shared even within the confines of Gardner-Webb University. But you could do a screenshot of the Zoom. Make sure if you do that and the person that you're interviewing, and you know what, I may have totally missed this question, Libby. I was thinking about interview for a job, but you may be talking about, hey, I'm going to contact the finance director and going to contact finance director and just interview them about their job. You can do that too. You can contact somebody in the central office and say, I want to come and interview you about what your job is like and how does that relate to my school. You can do that. If you do that, same thing, you can do the interview questions, do a screenshot of the interview. But if you do that, make sure that you have permission from that person. If there's any identifiable information there, make sure that you have permission to share that. If you're interviewing a finance director or even the principal or even an instructional specialist, just to find out more about what their job is in relationship to being an administrator, you can record that. You can record that. But if you're interviewing somebody, if it's a job seeking context, then I wouldn't necessarily record that and share that recording. All right, great question.
Dr. Bullis, for one of my hours, or it's 2 hours,
Yes, sir.
my principal asked me to sit up there. Right now, we don't have a secretary. She passed away. And so, and also our assistant principal, she has to wait there for the buses and be available if somebody misses or anything like that. And so they asked me if I would do that. Would that count? And I mean, I have a picture of me sitting there, but I mean, I like
that. That's great.
There's not been any issue yet, but if there was to be an issue, I'm gonna do it every Monday. But if there was to be an issue, now I have to call the parent and have somebody pick them up, wait for the kid, make sure the kid's taken care of, that kind of thing.
Josh, that's a great question. Great question. And first of all, man, my condolences to your whole staff and the family of that secretary. I'm so sorry. I just hope and pray that God will give you all, including their family, grace and peace in that situation. I just went through that with my mother-in-law, and if it
sorry to hear that.
That's okay, man. She's definitely in a better place, definitely. But yeah, if I didn't have that support from my friends and family and people I work with, we wouldn't have made it through it. So my prayers with that whole situation.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yeah, to get back to your question, you're in the office, you're dealing with office stuff, you're answering phone calls, you're dealing with parents. Yeah, you can count that time. You can definitely count that time, because as a principal, you're going to be doing that, especially you dealing with parents, especially if you got a parent on the phone and they're like, hey, where's my kid? Buddy, there's all kinds of opportunities for leadership there. How do you document that? That, like you said, just going in the office and taking a selfie, in the chair.
Right.
You don't need to do that. But if there's an email from the principal asking you to do that, or the principal made that request of you verbally and you put that on your calendar, that's good proof.
Actually, I did put it on my calendar, but I also I made sure it went through an email. I asked her if I could do, she mentioned to me, she mentioned that would be something I would be able to do. And so I went through an email and asked her about it so I could have it documented that way as well.
Okay. Yeah, great. Yeah, that'll work. And that's a great question. So just to be clear, we need to some type of artifact for every entry on the log. I am so glad you brought that up. No, you don't. If you want to use that as an open-ended artifact for your competency folio, we'll talk more about that. Then yeah, that's a great opportunity. But if you can collect the artifact, do so. You don't have to have one. It's really for your internship hours. That's what that proof column is you just kind of write out for yourself what would be evidence of this internship. You do not have to collect it unless you want to put it in your competency folio. Because like I said, the default for me is that I'm going to trust you. This is what I did. I'm going to believe you. Hey, you're welcome. I'm going to believe that you did this. I'm not necessarily going to ask for an artifact. But if you're thinking about, hey, this is a great opportunity for me to use it in my competency folio, then yeah, go ahead and collect that. Great questions. I like it when you guys ask great questions and make great comments. Man, it makes the class go by. Well, you know how it is when you're in your classroom. Speaking of, it's 8:02. If you want to cut out, you cut out, but I'll stay here as long as anybody needs me to stay here.
I do have a question about the games. What would you necessarily be looking at if we were to supervise games? What's some of the stuff we should be doing?
Yeah, in terms of, athletic events or, you're a band director, right, Josh?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, in terms of athletic events and things like that, if you're helping with crowd control, if you're in this situation, if you're monitoring masks, if you're counting people, if you're supervising students, then all of that, if you're talking to parents, and public relations type scenario, if you're helping out with the SROs or the sheriff's deputies that's on duty, if you're making contact with the ticket booth, if you're, even with the concession stand, supervision of that, all of that's good opportunities for leadership. Like I said, you can only go so far with those opportunities. Your band students, you're coordinating with, the band and the coaches, and you coordinate with the principal, at halftime, what you can do and what you can't do. Great opportunities for CDC guideline
Yes,
implementation,
sir.
mask,
Temperatures,
coverage for
stuff
the
like that.
instrument. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, good question.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I got to cut out, Dr. Bullis, but I appreciate all your help. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. I'm going to go ahead and pull it to a close. If you want to stay on, let me know. I'm good to stay.
I just had some quick questions about my task 1. Just want to make sure when I correct some of those things, I do it correctly. Is this the right time to ask those questions?
Yeah, we can, if you want to hang out, since it's specific to you, that's great. First thing I want to do is ask how to pronounce your first name. And I'm so sorry, but you're dealing with an old redneck here that, my dialect is, Wilkes County redneck. And I'm so sorry. But yeah, Libby, I saw where you can't hear. I guess just go back and catch the recording on this. I'll type it in the chat here in a little bit. Maybe you can catch up on everything. But yeah, if you guys want to hang out, if you got specific questions for you, I am going to actually stop the recording since we're specific right now. And then we'll deal with any questions that you may have.